Leo new moons are less intense than Leo full moons. Characterized by preparation, you await the curtain call as you stand backstage. Your heart beats, your nervous system is primed, listening for the starter's gun. You are ready for performance. The time has come. The concept of serendipity, where preparation meets opportunity, is associated with this lunar phase. Uranian influences during this time may result in significant changes, which can be interpreted positively or negatively, depending on your mindset. Hey there, Truth Seeker. Welcome to the Star Kittens community where we discuss 13 sign astrology. Are you in alignment with your divine design? Do you want to master the metaphysical reality? Open the doors of perception. Each planetary body is an archetype, a template, if you will, that helps us interpret human behavior and the world around us. The more awake and aware we are, the more synchronicity will show up in your life. Our focus today is the Leo new moon, forming a volatile T-square with Icarus, Uranus, and Sedna. We will also examine the troubling opposition to Lilith in Capricorn. To help us reach more souls with this important message, please like, share, and subscribe. There's a lot going on, so let's jump in. Kia ora, David.
Kia ora.
A warm, sunny afternoon here in the middle of what's supposed to be still winter. We have a lot going on today. What would you like to give us as an overview?
Well, I guess breakdowns and breakthroughs was the two words that came to mind immediately. Of course, the metaphor for Uranian energy is lightning. Where and how it will strike is absolutely unknown. And when I was thinking about this, the Tower of Babel did come to mind as well, which represents gains and achievement and power that is devoid of light. So when that lightning strikes, it acts as a wake-up call to soulless, egocentric leaders and for those types of individuals to come back to center. A spark that's needed to speak your truth and stand up and be counted. This is what Leo and Uranian energies are about when combined. Uranus conjunct Sedna and Taurus involves the earth on the one side and water, particularly the Arctic region. Leo involves, of course, public displays, art and creative expression on one side, and on the other, hubris and arrogance. Leo is also associated, of course, and most people understand this and know this, with leadership, with courage, with strength, again on one side, but on the other, Leo can also be associated with dominance, and of course, the lion is an apex predator. Sedna, in the archetype, and we've spoken of her previously, but she is related to the Arctic. And when you combine Sedna with Leo leadership, and of course Icarus on the other side of this T-square that you touched on, we're talking about three different energies: the Arctic, leadership, and risk-taking. And of course, what came to mind also when thinking about those three energies was this meeting taking place right now, or has just taken place depending on when you listen to this, between Putin and Trump in Alaska, of course, which is an Arctic region. Two leaders discussing something in the Arctic kind of makes sense to me. Where it will go, what it means, how it's related to this new moon, I don't know, but certainly all of the pieces certainly point in some respect to that meeting. Icarus, of course, and for those who are familiar with the story, it's one of the most common stories. The Icarus flew into the sea, or flew too close to the sun. But Icarus, therefore, is the archetype of calculated risk that can either pay off or can fail spectacularly. Lilith, in opposition to this new moon, speaks to black magic rituals by nefarious leaders. But Lilith is also, when opposite Leo, is a call to liberty of the divine feminine. That Lilith distortion of female archetypes, which we'll touch on a little later, is a big issue that can come up at this time. And it will need, when speaking with Lilith and dealing with Lilith, and of course with the courageous risk-taking, the energies that are here because of the presence of Icarus as well, when we're thinking about Lilith, brave leaders are needed to speak up against female oppression and anything to do with that very difficult, very contentious topic. This lunation, this new moon, is very polarized in a sense, which makes the two sides stark in contrast, like black and white, like cold and hot, very obvious. There's no real middle ground when doing an interpretation, and we can't lean one way or the other. So we'll touch on both the positive and the negative aspects of this new moon because it involves that Uranian frequency of surprise and lightning. So we have in place the conditions for public drama, Leo drama, if you like. And this could involve public figures, but not necessarily. It could also involve something like, around the time of this new moon, the release of a new movie that people look back on and go, wow, that was incredible. Or it could be the release of a significant media event. It could be a chart-topping song that we don't recognize straight away as being a big hit, but ends up being so, and it can be traced back to this new moon. These are all Leo creative expression types of things that can happen with the Uranian frequency involved. There could be that an artist goes viral. It could be that you go viral on, if you're a content creator or a broadcaster or a podcaster. Leo is also on the very mundane level. That's the big picture, the artists and the movies and all of that. But also Leo is about fun and is about laughter, is about celebration and play. And it could just be that this is a reminder to let your hair down and let loose and have fun and play games just for a while, just to get away from the seriousness of life.
Yes, what just came to me as you said that is that some of us just want to keep everything so perfect at all times. And so we've got this really high expectation of how things should be. And I think if we just accept that we all make mistakes and let's just be brave and have fun about it and kind of let that weight fall off our shoulders. And Icarus and Leo both talk to that for me anyway. So for this new moon, it occurs here in New Zealand at on the 23rd of August at 6 minutes past 6 in the evening. The sun and moon are at 11 degrees Leo, and of course the sun is in its home sign. What is the new moon Leo energy telling us?
Yeah, Leo new moon. What do we know about Leo new moons? Firstly, obviously, it's a fire sign, so therefore it's related very specifically to action and activation and especially extroversion. Of course, you just mentioned it's the sign of the sun, but it's the seat of power and it's the seat or core of confident self-expression. That's Leo to a T. This is a time, or Leo energies are a time or an opportunity to express our creativity, particularly through games and also artistic displays. When I think of games and I think of my childhood in particular, and I watch you and playing with your kids, for example, games are teachers. We were talking the other day about chess. Well, there's a great way to develop strategy in a young mind or an older mind for that matter. Charades or Twister can be simply and purely about fun under a Leo energy. Jenga and battleships, a little bit of seriousness there, but also a little bit of luck, but it's about using our mind in three dimensions, both of those games. Leo, of course, taps into these faculties. The Leo house, wherever it is located for you as an individual, is where you take what you know and you play with it. Play being the key word. Leo, of course, is the basis for entrepreneurship. It's also where we test and learn by experimenting, where we combine our elements of communication and left brain analysis and right brain creative thinking. Of course, when you think of artists, actors, um, people that are very good at displaying creativity, it's not just about putting it out there. Actually, there's some thought and some framework and often some scripts that go with that as well. So let's not forget that there's all of those elements at play under Leo. Of course, the obvious resonances of Leo is about leadership, and we touched on that. Everyone knows that Leo is related to the lion and the lioness. Of course, that invoked for me when I was thinking about that is what type of leader are you? Are you a leader? What type of leader are you? Or alternatively, what type of leadership do you best respond to? Is it democratic leadership, autocratic leadership, authoritative leadership, laissez-faire leadership, transformational leadership, transactional leaders, bureaucratic leaders, servant leaders? There's so many different expressions of leadership under Leo that there's a full range and gamut of experiences to be explored under the sign.
Mm. And I guess then it really depends on how your childhood was, right? How you best respond to certain leaders. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that input about Leo. So Uranus sitting, as you mentioned, conjunct with Sedna in Taurus, but this Uranian, the lightning strikes, the Tower of Babel. What kind of energies are you picking up there?
Uranian surprise. Expect the unexpected. We get little to no warning about lightning. Of course, you can see a weather report and it will say, oh, there's lightning coming, but ultimately we don't get much warning about when or if it will strike or whether it will happen at all. And that's the whole curiousness about lightning. Of course, lightning being the metaphor for Uranian energies. On a personal level, luck happens when preparation and opportunity meet or intersect. So if anyone has been working on a project, they've got an entrepreneurial side to them, they have a side hustle, they're playing with their art or their music, their creativity, you may well find with this new moon and the 28-day period, of course, of it, that you get a breakthrough, and that's potentially written in the stars. Equally, something may break down. You may get a wake-up call. You may have a turn of events that you didn't expect. You may get a slap in the face. You may be humiliated. You may have a leveling of your ego. Again, both of those energies are positioned as potential in the stars. There's no way of knowing how it will play out or how it will be interpreted because, of course, that comes down to individuals' mindsets. So I use the terms breakdown or breakthrough when it comes to Leo and Uranian energy is paired. But irrespective of what words you use, these things, breakdowns, breakthroughs, are always about our development. Sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees, and we need to have an external event happen that shakes us out of that reality and gets us out of that mindset and gets us out of that rut, if you like. And there's a silver lining in every disaster. If something happens that we didn't see, some left ball, curved ball comes at us and we have to deal with that, just remember that our mindset is key and that the sun is always shining somewhere, always.
Yeah, absolutely. And having to go through something in the moment, you might not realize the beautiful life lessons that it's teaching you. So as I mentioned, Setna is conjunct Uranus, Sedna, the Arctic myth. Go back to some of our older videos. We go in great detail. Not sure how much detail you'll share today with us, David, but it is another feminine archetype that we talk about when it comes to Sedna.
Yeah, Sedna. I won't go into much of the mythology today. We've covered that previously, but it is an archetype on an interpersonal level. It's directed specifically at the father-daughter relationship. It's a sad story and tale of female subjugation and repression, where an overbearing father made decisions for his daughter. He didn't consider Sedna's feelings when he arranged a marriage for her. He completely overrode her. So this brings to mind and to our hearts and our souls concepts of power struggles, of the male dominance, which is that shadow side of Leo that I touched on before. That's at an interpersonal level. Of course, at a collective level, Sedna and the archetype is about humanity's relationship with the sea. Now, metaphorically, the sea speaks to consciousness and unconsciousness. And of course, the sea of consciousness or unconsciousness refer to, in the metaphor, extending that metaphor, the flow of creative power and force that can be, on the one hand, harnessed for good, but on the other can overwhelm us. The strong currents of the sea, we can be swept out to sea, we can have a fear of the deep. So these types of issues come forward and are tied up in this quite complex archetype. On a physical level, though, the Sedna and the archetype with the Arctic and the Inuit and the Eskimos have a lot of stories and mythology about Sedna, which you can look up for yourselves. But physically, Sedna reminds humanity that we need to take care of the resources of the sea, of the marine life. We need to be conscious consumers. And part of that is not only to do with the fish and overfishing and so on and so forth, but also at an even deeper level, the sea is where phytoplankton resides. And we touched on this previously when we've spoken of Sedna, but I'm going to touch on it again. How important phytoplankton is, and therefore that's part of this sea mythology, which is Sedna, and Sedna is the deity that presides over the Arctic and marine life. But phytoplankton are crucial primary producers in all marine ecosystems. They act as the basis of the food web, and they play a vital role in oxygen production and carbon cycling. They convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and nutrients into organic matter through photosynthesis, providing food for zooplankton and larger marine animals. Additionally, phytoplankton are a major sink for atmospheric carbon dioxide, and they contribute significantly to global oxygen production. So we absolutely need to be taking care of the seas. Phytoplankton are responsible for approximately half of the Earth's oxygen production through photosynthesis. So Sedna's presence here reminds us to be aware of the marine ecosystem, to play our part in ensuring that its maintenance, protection, and regeneration is front of mind. And even as one consumer going through the aisles at the supermarket, we can make decisions that affect ultimately the seas by the decisions that we make to buy or not buy something. Now, of course, I touched on the interpersonal side of that father-daughter relationship. I've touched on the humanity and the collective side of Sedna as well. But this issue of the Arctic and what's beneath the ice and the mystery and the unknown is also part of this. And this is all coming forward as concepts and ideas that are floating in the ethers, if you like. They're floating in the field at this time because of that relationship with Uranus, which is sitting directly alongside. And of course, if Uranus is lightning, and a disruptor and anything can happen, then some of these ideas, some of these concepts may well come forward at this time.
Yeah. I love that we are able to talk about these different feminine archetypes and just the different messages that they bring, and that maybe next time when you go fishing yourself and you catch a beautiful here we love our snappers, that you don't just take the fillets, but you actually use the majority of the fish. You could use the heads for, I don't know, making fish stock or whatever, and it's using more and more of the whole thing. It's the same with any food that we take. Don't just take the superficial, the really nice, but use the whole lot. And that way we become more conscious consumers. My son has asked me a few times if we can go fishing, but I'm not very good when it comes to that. So I'll leave that task to other people. Um, Icarus. We've spoken about Icarus many times. It's one of my favorite Greek myths. Son and father are trapped in a prison, and the father's clever enough to have made some wings using feathers that they found in wax. And he warns his son to not go up too high because the sun will be able to melt the wax and then the wings will fall to pieces. And Icarus wanted to take that risk and did not listen carefully to his father and flew too close and found that the way down came up very quickly. So how is this Icarus? It is on the other side of the sun and moon, and it's sitting at 16 degrees Libra. It's opposite that conjunction of Saturn and Uranus. So what is the energy giving us?
Yeah, Icarus is one of those myths that many people know about, but they don't necessarily attribute it to the asteroid Icarus that is in the mosaic that we talk about. But the Icarian Sea, if that's the way you say it, some people have a slightly different way of saying that, but the Icarian Sea in the Mediterranean, of course, reflects the story. It's a Greco-Roman story. It's been around, for a long, long time. But you just touched on, the mythology and um, the myth behind it. And that flying too close to the sun, of course, is a metaphor. And if the Sedna myth an archetype is about the father-daughter relationship, then this one, Icarus, is about the father-son relationship. The father, of course, as you mentioned, survived that situation because he used those wings to escape that prison. And there's a whole bunch of metaphor and analogy tied up with, finding your wings and flying free and so on and so forth, getting out of captivity, using creativity to escape from captivity. Again, that's very much aligned with the Leo energy as well. When he and his son fashioned those wings from wax and feathers, that's the ultimate creativity, right? So that's linking creativity with liberty. So there's quite deep meaning to this archetype. But as the sun plunged to his demise in the Icarian Sea, which is what it came to be named, and we speak of that father and son relationship, in this context, what I was looking at as a kind of an angle to tie Leo back in was, how do fathers develop the wisdom to pass on to their male offspring? I mean, how do you do that? What's one way of doing that? And in the context of Leo, maybe one of the ways to do that is to play games and to teach life skills through those games. You see, Icarus really stands for and represents calculated risks, and it's important to take calculated risks, not to fly off the handle, not to do something sight unseen, not to leap and worry about what's happening afterwards. It's to take a calculated risk, and that is absolutely at the heart of the moral of the story. So therefore, the primary question or issue that emerges with Icarus and the archetype and the myth of Icarus is that excessive ambition and a disregard for warnings, especially when coupled with hubris, excessive pride, i.e., the shadow sides of Leo, can lead to disastrous consequences. This myth is a classic example of hubris, what excessive pride and overconfidence can do. Icarus's disregard for his dad's wisdom and his reckless pursuit of soaring far too high or too close to the sun demonstrates the dangers of unchecked ambition. Icarus's fate serves for all of us individually and collectively, therefore, as a cautionary tale about the need for balance and moderation. Very interesting that Icarus is in Libra at this time. And to walk the middle path, to avoid extremes, and that's often the safest and the wisest course for us to take. This story explores the complexities of ambition. Of course, ambition first gets kindled in Leo. When we are talking about ambition, it can be a powerful motivator, and it's very important in the human experience, but it can also lead to excessive recklessness and ultimately destruction. So therefore, Icarus's ambition to reach the sun, while initially exhilarating and he felt powerful and amazing, it ultimately proved fatal. And that's the key to remember here.
Yeah, it's look at me, and then you fall over. But what came to me as you were saying that about this father-son relationship on social media, I see more and more of these little reels where people talk about the importance of letting boys be boys, and boys be boys, and those little reels is let them play in the dirt and play with the little digger or stamp in the mud, or to really explore their physical boundaries as well, like how far can they push their bodies potentially, how far can they play. And if you stop them from doing that, then when they are in their teenage years or a bit older, then it could be that look at me, and then things go wrong. And so it's that really big importance of letting boys be boys. And the other thing that I learned from some of the books that I've read is as your son gets older, don't do anything for him anymore. And it's actually, they say from the age of 5, don't do stuff for them, because we're so quickly going, oh, you can't open that bottle, I'll do it for you. Oh, you can't put your shoes on, I'll do it for you. And you just take away that authority for them, that where they need to figure it out. And I don't know enough whether girls think about that very similarly. But we've taken so much of our children away. And if you are of a similar thinking as me, that then giving technology to our young teenagers, I'm talking about phones, tablets, free reign on the internet, we almost dump adulthood on them, and they don't have that discernment of this is making me feel yucky, I should turn it off. They just get consumed by it. And is that the cause for a lot of the depression in the young adults these days? I don't know, but it's just something to think about, that children are children, and we need to let them be children, figure stuff out, make mistakes, fall over and get back up, and experience that the getting back up is such a good feeling. It's, if you never fall, you don't understand what it feels like to get back up. That's my 2 cents worth anyway. And the last one we are going to talk about is asteroid Lilith. So it's a physical thing in the night sky. It's not an imaginary point in the chart. And Lilith sits opposite this new moon, and she's sitting at 24 degrees Capricorn. What would you like to share about her today?
Lilith is a complex and difficult archetype. It's difficult to talk about. It's difficult to interpret. And she sits at the core. One thing that we do know is that Lilith sits at the core of this idea of female subjugation and the so-called quote unquote battle of the sexes, as does Sedna as well. as does Persephone or Ceres. I mean, there are multiple female archetypes, but really Lilith is probably the biggest and most prominent, but most misunderstood of all of these. Lilith is associated with the mitochondrial Eve. The names are interchangeable, and depending on which mythology you're looking at, Greco-Roman or other interpretations, these names, Lilith, Eve, are interchanged. Just like Pallas Athena and Minerva are interchanged, just like Ceres and Persephone are interchanged. They refer ultimately to the same deities, but they come out of these different collective thoughts and philosophical musings about these archetypes. So just be aware of that. So Lilith, the mitochondrial Eve, the first woman, on one side of this mythology is that she was being blamed for bringing sin, quote unquote, to the world by eating the apple of knowledge. Now, whether that's true or not, there are a lot of religions out there that actually believe that to be true. So therefore, Lilith and Eve, that name is derided, and there are massive and huge billion people groups on the planet of fundamentalist religious thinkers and groups and collectives that are, because of that misunderstanding, that belief, that absolute, almost fervent idea that Eve is the source of evil because she ate of the apple, that has led to this massive amounts of misogynism that comes through these religious sects, more extreme sects, but also some of the mainstream religions have got this in it as well. And the seat of it is this Eve ate the apple of knowledge and she is to blame. So that's part of this. And that's why it's very difficult to talk about, because even saying it here on this podcast will probably upset some people. But I'm going to give the other side as well. But we've got to look at all of it. The stories of Eve, therefore, or Lilith, are contorted, they're confused, and they're very confronting. But I think that that's by design. You see, the black magicians on one side of this, popularized by the very evil Aleister Crowley, who used the Lilith archetype as a source of creation. They invoked her name in rituals, occult practices, and ceremonial magic. And in some corners, particularly in these sects and these orders, what we would call the Bavarian Illuminati and the shadow governments and these sorts of groups, collectives, they invoke the name of Lilith. They invoke her in these rituals, in these black magic ceremonies. They revere her as a dark queen, as a harlot, and as a Madonna. Therefore, many of the images and ideas about Lilith are disturbing, and many of us can sit back and say, that is detestable what's going on there. So we have her as the seat of being blamed in many religious cults, which leads to misogynism. We also have her being used as in an alchemical way within these very dark occultic and ceremonial practices. So that's just two aspects of Lilith, and we still haven't got to the third yet. So occultists denigrate the feminine energy, they neuter it, and they render it as secondary to the masculine. That is where this command and control and patriarchal worldview ultimately comes back to. Lilith represents the more lighter side, but she represents the feminine mystique. She represents autonomy. She represents self-sovereignty. Lilith resisted the patriarchal control structures. The story being that she walked away from a marriage from Adam and she went her own way. There are some versions that say, no, that never happened. There are other versions that say that is what happened. If you think about Sedna, again, arranged marriage, but that one ended in tragedy. You think about Ceres and Persephone, same sort of story of female subjugation. So Lilith or Eve actually represents breaking free of a lot of that. So she resists these control structures. Eve broke free of the institute of marriage to find her own way, arranged marriage being the key here. But Lilith Therefore, in the very positive and the light side of Lilith, she speaks to us on an individual and a collective level about developing agency and critical thinking. When she sits opposite Leo, as she does at this new moon, this is about having the courage to speak up about female repression and suppression, but do it in a creative way. And that's, through artistic writing, performance, art, music, dance, however it's done. There are various ways of expressing that feminine energy, even in males as well. This is not just directed at females. This is also directed at males because, of course, we have feminine energy in us as well. So there's types of situations that might come up with Leo, which is kind of finding your voice and your self-confidence and tapping into your mojo, if you like, and having this Lilith on the other side, the opposition. The types of issues that might come up are breaking the glass ceiling. There might be conversations about unequal pay in the workplace. There might be an upending of traditional parenting roles in the household. There may be a breaking of stereotypes. These are the Leo expressions of this Lilith archetype sitting opposite. Lilith needs to find her voice for all of the reasons that I've just touched on earlier. She has been distorted, she has been messed with, but ultimately at the core of Lilith is, as I said, this is about agency, this is about self-sovereignty, this is about autonomy, this is about coming into alignment with one's divine design. And those questions, those philosophical ideas apply equally to males and females, regardless of situations and regardless of circumstances. So hopefully there will be some out there, even if they don't hear this podcast, I think it's in the field, there will be some that will take this opportunity, that will be triggered by the Uranian impulse to speak up, to, as I said, break the glass ceiling, to upend the traditional stereotypes, to break the mold, as it were.
Thank you. And if you would like to get in touch with your divine design for this lifetime, hit us up for a personalized chart or a natal reading. We love doing those. You can find all our videos on YouTube. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Audible. And flick us a message, comment on our content. We enjoy conversing with you and seeing where you are listening from. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today, David.
Namaste.
Ngā mihi, until next time.